So what do you think we're going to be cooking today with these ingredients? It's the 30th of October. Hi everyone, welcome to my Cook at Home series with Tonya here at Cooking on the Bay. Yes, it's the 30th of October today. This is our first week of freedom in Melbourne. We've been allowed out and we've been allowed to socialise a little bit, so everyone's feeling quite happy. And I thought it might be a really nice time to start thinking of Christmas, because we're going to be able to hopefully enjoy it with our family and our friends, possibly go interstate. And I thought a Christmas cake would be just perfect for us to start now. So we're going to have to do it in a couple of stages, because you need to macerate or marinate your fruit. Okay, so you need to have your fruit chopped and ready to go. And it's that part today that I think is what I want to focus on, because as I said, you need to marinate it for at least overnight. If you have longer, which we do, we could possibly, I'm going to marinate mine for a week. And so I'll leave it in a nice sealed container, one of these containers, and I will put it away somewhere nice and cool, and in a week's time I will make the second part of the cake, which is the actual mixing and the baking of the other ingredients. Now, at the same time as this, I like to get the cake tin done, okay? So mine is a 20 centimetre by 20 centimetre cake tin. It actually ends up by being about a 10 kilogram cake. It's quite heavy, and it's packed full of absolutely fabulous, lovely ingredients. And because we do marinate it with the brandy, the cake will last at least a year, if not two. I've kept mine a little tiny pieces sometimes if there's some left over, either cryovac or sealed very well with cling wrap and in a little container, and it's been delicious for a year or so later. But the most important thing about lining your tin is that you use at least 4 pieces of brown paper, 4 thicknesses I mean, and lots of butter. So when it comes to the butter, I actually take the butter off. It's softened butter, but I take it off, put it in my fingers. It's the best way to do it. Firstly, rub it around the inside of the baking tin, and then you put your first layer of paper and you butter that, and you do your second and third. Now, I have actually used some little brown paper bags, which I've saved. Lots of people give you brown paper bags these days. It's already double, so that's good. So I just cut it out, line it as best I can, make it as neat as I can. Some people probably are more neater than me, and they're more perfectionists than me, but that's perfectly fine. It has to come above the tin, because you want to protect the top of the cake. Now, the reason for the 4 thicknesses is because the cake cooks for about 3.5 hours, and so you want it to be protected. You don't want it to burn on the outside. Now, you can have it even higher than that if you wish. I think my mother did. Now, when my mother made this, and this is my grandmother's recipe, come from my grandmother to my mother, now to me, she used to line it with brown paper and newspaper, put newspaper underneath, and she'd always put it on it with newspaper, actually under it in the oven as well, to protect it even more from the intense heat. When I was doing this morning, Michael said, "Why are you using brown paper bags?" And I said, "Because my mother always did." I'm sure you could possibly use baking paper now, but you would need at least 4 or 5 thicknesses of baking paper. And it's a good use for the old brown paper bags that we have recycling in my kitchen anyway. So your tin is done. Put that in a plastic bag to keep it nice and clean. Put it away somewhere near your fruit while you're marinating your fruit. So when it comes to the fruit, I'll give you all the ingredients and the quantities and things on the website, and as we go through it, I guess, but also as I bake it. So we've got about 120 grams of currants, of mixed peel. We've got 250 grams of raisins. We've got 125 grams of glace cherries, and you can have a mixture of green, red and yellow. As I said, 120 grams of currants, and we've got 700 grams of sultanas, okay? So the Country Women's Association, their view of when they judge Christmas cakes or fruit cakes is that the Christmas cake, or the cake rather, should be the size of the fruit is most important. The size of the fruit should all be uniform. So they would spend a lot of time chopping up their fruit, making sure it's the right size. Because you can imagine that if you cut into your cake and you've got a big piece of fruit like that raisin, it's not going to cut well. It'll make it much more difficult and it won't look so pretty either. So we're going to cut up our raisins about the size of our sultanas, okay? So that's about the size we're looking for. And it also happens to be about the size of the mixed peel. We don't have to cut that anymore. The sultanas are pretty okay. I actually am not going to cut up my sultanas. Possibly some people may. I actually don't know that. But we're going to be chopping up our raisins today and our glace cherries. We're then going to be putting everything that we've cut and prepared into the marinating container. We're going to be adding 40 mils of brandy. Now, that's what my recipe says, 40 mils of brandy. But when you see it, as you will when I've finished it and before we cook it next time, it actually, the fruit absorbs this brandy very quickly. So I think I'm going to use up to a cup of brandy. So I'll show you at the end just how much I use. Okay, so we're going to put in our mixed peel and our little currants. If you've got a few sultanas or currants or raisins or something in the back of your cupboard that are looking a little bit dried out, don't worry, because the brandy is going to reconstitute them and make them nice and juicy again. So the size that I'm talking about, I'm not going to cut up all of these now because they'll take some time. My little glace cherries I'm going to cut into 4, and I normally do this as I'm watching the TV news or doing something else, okay? I usually listen to the radio, talk to someone on the phone, but I certainly don't spend, it takes about half an hour, but it is worth doing, and I know my mother was very particular about the way she chopped up her fruit. So you can see that size there. It is a little bit tedious, but we'll get there. And the same with the currants. Yes, the currants. I've cut up a few before. Cut them into about 3. 1, 2, 3. And there's no way really, you might be able to put a few together, but there's no secret to doing it quicker. It's just a matter of doing it. I remember over the years my mother was the job that she dreaded most, actually, the chopping of the fruit for the Christmas cake. But it's only 250 grams, what is it, about 375 grams altogether. So that's what we're going to be doing with these. Now for this, I'm just going to show you how wet this is when you put in your 40 mils of brandy. And for me, that is nothing like enough, okay? So this little measure, what is it? 120 mils. I'm going to put in at least another 120 mils and we'll see how wet it is. This is also great for preserving. So now we're putting 160 altogether, okay? And looking at that, I think that's plenty because you can see that there's some there at the bottom of the container. But after a little while, when you see us back here in a week's time, you'll see that will all have been absorbed, especially once you've added your raisins and your glace cherries, okay? So the only other thing that I do at this stage of the procedure, pretend they're all done and they're all in there, is my almonds. And the same principle applies for the almonds as the rest of the cake. So you want to have them chopped up. You can see that if you're trying to cut through your cake, it's pretty hard with the almonds. So exactly the same thing. I usually cut them in half and then I cut them again. You can do a bit of a chomp, chomp, chomp from them, but you don't want them too shredded. You don't want them you don't want them too powdery. So it's basically a matter of chopping them. But you can see that it's more important to get them about that size. So basically, whatever suits you, down the middle, in half for some that aren't so big. But that's about the size we're after. So I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'm not going to put this in with the marinating liquid, obviously. I'm going to be putting these in another little container here, and I'll seal it, another little plastic container that I'll find somewhere, and I'll put that to one side with the rest of the ingredients. So the rest of the ingredients, just quickly, to give you some idea, as I said, I will be putting all the ingredients on the website so that you can, and in the YouTube description. We've got butter, 220 grams of butter, which we're going to beat up, and when it's nice and smooth, you then add your sugar, which is your cup of brown sugar, 180 grams of brown sugar. You're going to be adding to that 4 eggs, and there's a secret to adding the eggs because you have to do it gently. If you do it too roughly, they can sometimes curdle. We've got 2 tablespoons rather, a beautiful Bon Maman or whatever brand you like, of orange marmalade. You've got half a teaspoon, and then you put it, so you've got all your wet ingredients. Then when your dry ingredients, you've got your flour, you've got your teaspoon of mixed spice, half a teaspoon, quarter of a teaspoon of cinnamon, quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg, and half a teaspoon of sugar. And in fact, I probably won't use that sugar, I'll use a finer sugar, okay, but it's half a teaspoon. And in amongst all of this, you have your orange and lemon, which we will microplane and zest and add to the mixture. Okay, so there we go. It probably would take you about an hour in total, half an hour say for your chopping of your ingredients, another half an hour for the actual mixing of the cake, and then it takes about 3.5 hours to cook. So it's really quite it's not as long a laborious process as you might think. So I wish you good luck with it, and I hope that you get on with your fruit. Just as a by the by before I do go, I want to show you this is my filling that I made last year for my little mince tarts. So it's mince filling, mince meat it's called. It's all the lovely fruit with suet and a lot of brandy, and it's been marinating now for a year, so it will taste sensationally good. My friend who makes Christmas cakes professionally and sells them online, she starts to marinate her fruit in June, July. She puts it in huge tubs, seals it really well, and puts it in a cool place until she's ready to make all her Christmas cakes, which she would be doing possibly in September. Okay, so I'll say goodbye for now, and we'll be back sometime soon to finish off our Christmas cake.